So the Warriors are back, better than they have been in the past 2 years, and easily have been one of the biggest surprises earlier on this season. With a disappointing conclusion to last year's run that did not result in a playoff appearance, and an offseason that was filled with drama and a lot of concerns, there were a lot of questions heading into this upcoming year. And in the first 10 games of the season, it seems as if a lot of these questions have already been answered. Golden State early on finds himself with a record of 8-2, sitting at the top of a very competitive Western Conference, and with a top 5 offense and defense, it has really been a game changer of what this team is projected to look like in the early stages of the year. Now, with all that being said, there will be some reservations that I still hold with this team throughout this video, in large part because of the strength of schedule, as well as some very hot shooting that I don't believe is sustainable throughout the course of an 82-game season. However, there is one thing that I've seen with Golden State that has been very impressive, and I do believe will be the identifier of what this team will look like throughout the course of not only the regular season, but also the playoffs as well. Some of the questions that many of us had before the season began that are immediately being answered early on have been the Klay Thompson replacement. How are some of the younger players are going to look, and can this team find a way to not overly depend on Curry? In terms of the Klay Thompson replacement, even though yes, it has been a talking point on how disappointing and underwhelming Klay has been over the past 2 years with the Warriors, the truth of the matter is that it's really hard to find anyone to produce at 18 to 20 points per game on relatively high volume with three-point shooting, and has been above league average with his accuracy. And losing Klay, regardless of how underwhelming he may have been, was a huge blow for a team that, again, at times overly dependent on Stephen Curry, but that replacement was much easier to find than I think many people were willing to admit. And no, it's not even the younger players, it's actually Buddy Hield. Buddy was an offseason acquisition, easily one of the better offseason acquisitions in the entire NBA early on this season, and his impact has been felt immediate. So far this season, he's averaging 18 points per game, giving around 4 rebounds, 2 assists, but the shooting splits have been remarkable. 50% from the field, 49% from behind the arc on 8 attempts a game, and 85 to 86% from the charity stripe, and all of this resulting to a true shooting percentage that is hovering around 67%. Everything that you would expect from Buddy from a movement shooter is exactly what you are seeing, and is the quintessential replacement for Klay Thompson. Catch and shoot, curls, pin downs, corner threes, you name it, Buddy got it for you early on, and he has been scorching hot. Now, I was going to be nasty and compare what Buddy is doing these first 10 games to what Klay was doing over the past 2 to 3 years with the Warriors, but it was unfair because I think it's pretty obvious. I don't want to just take a jab at Klay relentlessly. It's clear that Klay has not been shooting at this level, and more importantly, it is a very small sample size. 10 games should not be compared to what someone did throughout the course of an entire season. However, with that being said, I still wanted to see when is the last time Klay has even had a 10-game sample size where he has shot this well and produced at this level, and effectively, I have to go all the way back to 2019. So pre-Achilles, pre-ACL, effectively peak prime Klay Thompson is the level in which Buddy Hield is effectively producing at. They are getting a watered down version of who Klay Thompson once was, and it has been a world of difference for an offense that has just overly dependent on an aging Stephen Curry over the past 2 to 3 years. And what may be even better is that Hield, unlike Klay, has openly accepted the bench role. He has been able to produce all of this within 25 minutes coming off of the bench, only starting 1 game, and so far we haven't heard any noise, any rumbling at all about his attitude by being a reserve player instead of a starter. So all of that has been great. So that's the Klay Thompson piece, and actually building off of that and going into another concern with the Warriors, which is how can this team not be overly dependent on Curry at times, and they've excelled at this as well. Curry early on has already missed 3 games, however the Warriors have not missed a beat, in a large part because of the amount of three-point shooting that we've seen throughout this season. Wiggins, Draymond, and Moses Moody are all shooting above 40% from behind the arc. It's actually been a revelation early on this season that they can rely on other players to knock down their shots, but what's probably more important is the ongoing talent that's on this roster. Steve Kerr received a lot, and I do mean a lot of criticism during the offseason with Team USA and the things in which happened overseas with his selection, his rotation, and even received some criticism early on for a lot of people claiming that he can't play as much of a roster as he was playing on in the first first 2 to 3 games. However, to Steve Kerr's credit, he has gotten the most out of a lot of players on his roster, and this team that was kind of sketchy around the margins over the past 2 years with some of their bench players have been remarkable early on. DeAnthony Melton has been amazing as a 3-and-D option. TJD is really good with his athleticism, needs to be a bit better with his rebounding, but still very impactful for this slight amount of minutes he's receiving. And Lindy Waters III, who was an OKC prospect transitioning to the Warriors, and he has been really good early on. I'm actually very surprised how impactful the minutes that he's been receiving early on and how that's translated to the point where he has been quite literally a very solid and consistent rotational player for the Warriors, and that's something that you probably did not expect heading into the year. But even with all that being said, I still have my hesitations. Like I alluded to early on in this video, a huge portion of the Warriors offense has been very hot jump shot shooting. Like I stated before, the amount of players on this team shooting above 40% from behind the arc that's not named Stephen Curry is definitely interesting, and I don't know how sustainable that is. And with a weaker schedule early on, again, some of these numbers, I don't necessarily know how long they're going to keep up, but until then, this has been a team that has found a lot of talent on the roster that has been able to translate to a point where Curry can only average 22 points per game and even miss some games, and they still have a top 5 offense in the NBA. However, I do believe a much bigger picture that the hot shooting has really covered up early on has been the questionable development from Jonathan Kuminga and B-Pods, which, in all honesty, could be a good or bad thing. The reason why I say it's a good thing is because, you know, Kuminga and B-Pods early on, especially Podziemski, has not been that great at all. And the fact that they're still winning games, the fact that they still look this great offensively, and they don't have to even rely on the young players, really speaks volumes to how talented this roster really is. But on the other side, this certainly is a concern because these are the 2 players that were in constant trade conversations all offseason long, and you want to see some type of development from them to justify not moving off of them for someone like Lauri Markkanen. In terms of Kuminga, some of the problems that we've constantly had with him early on in his career are still very prevalent. Early on, he's a starter. I had some questions about him being in a rotation with Wiggins and Draymond, the lack of shooting, and it was certainly there. And at times, Kuminga tends to deviate a bit from the offense, which makes all the sense in the world for him to be coming off of the bench and sharing way more minutes with other players such as Buddy Hield and Trace, who need to be a bit more complimentary. And if they start to deviate a little bit, it makes more sense for him to do that as well, which is a huge reason why, even though for the season, Kuminga is averaging 14 to 15 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and shooting splits of 48, 34, and 67 from the free throw line, he looks significantly better in the 7 games in which he's coming off of the bench. And in those 7 games when he is a reserve, he's averaging 17 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and his shooting splits are the most noteworthy improvement, 52% from the field, 43.5 from behind the arc, and 67 from the charity stripe. Now, for whatever reason, in the NBA community, we do this thing where we just bash players for accepting and thriving in a bench role, and sometimes it just makes the most sense because that's where they're best complementary. In the starting 5 that features Draymond and Wiggins, and depending who's at the 5, it may not make the most sense for Kuminga to be out there. The defense looks great, but offensively, it might not make the most sense. Kuminga is certainly someone who is best suited to be thriving on his own with complementary players around him, in particular 3-point shooters, rather than someone who's trying to complement move off ball and trying to be more of a shooter, which is something that's just not his strong suit. So all of that makes the most sense. Now, in terms of B-Pods, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't necessarily know how optimistic I can be for him. Again, a lot of the concerns that we saw last year are still very prevalent this year. The reservations to shoot, not being aggressive, and even though his decision making is still there, and defensively he's also improved as well, but the all-around offensive firepower that many people expected out of him early on just is non-existent. Averaging around 9 points, 5 rebounds, almost 4 assists in only 26 minutes, which is very impressive, but shooting splits of 39, 17, and 50%, just all deplorable, like just really bad. I'm not going to sit here and be too critical on him because it's a 10-game sample size and we've seen much better from him, but not being able to produce against some of the weaker part of the schedule is also very concerning, and I hope that he turns around sooner than later. But again, the fact that the Warriors look this good and Kuminga and B-Pods have had their ups and downs early on really does speak volumes to how talented this team really is, and I do believe the biggest reason for this this is because of their defense. I am blown away by how great the defense looks early on, and I do believe there has been a lot of shift in focus on the level of detail and attention that has been given to this team with the addition of Jerry Stackhouse on the bench. He has been a revelation of what this team is looking for defensively, and a lot of the same schemes, intensity that we saw back in 2022 that led to the Warriors winning a championship is starting to be seen once more. And all of this is being led by Draymond Green and Andrew Wiggins. It needs to be applauded what Draymond is doing in year 13. Not to say that he's going to win DPOY, but the fact that at year 13, Draymond is still performing at this level defensively is fantastic. It's amazing. And an engaged Wiggins has really been a difference maker from a POA perspective. The blitzing and smothering defense that translates into a lot of turnovers is back, and it's better than ever. We saw this a lot with the Boston Celtics matchup as Tatum struggled mightily in the first half trying to organize the offense, and Wiggins and Kuminga completely just took him out of his rhythm and really set the tone for this Warriors defense throughout that entire outing. This has also been seen with other teams, especially with the roll man, because even when the blitz does come with the ball handler coming off of the pick and roll, the right rotations are constantly happening. Blind spots are being taken advantage of from bigs who get the ball in the high post or even on the baseline, which then forces turnovers as well. And the low man is always prevalent. Draymond has talked about this religiously over the past few years about having a defensive scheme that is sound by always having a low man, someone always there to protect the rim. And at 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", whatever, however tall Draymond is, he has always been a more than adequate enough rim protector for many years, an elite one. But I have to give credit where credit is due. Once more, Andrew Wiggins, he has been fantastic with his rotations, tagging players, getting in places and positions where he's supposed to be. And even some of the supporting cast members as well, they have really exceeded and excelled expectations. I talked about this with B-Pods. He's actually been a really sound defender. Buddy Hield also rotates over. He gives really good effort as well. And I do believe in terms of Kuminga, this actually may be the biggest upside with him. A lot of his fouling has toned down a little bit, though there are some boneheaded moments here and there, but all around, he doesn't foul as much. He does commit to the idea of being way more engaged as a POA or on-ball defender. His rotations are much more crisp than they were in the previous years. And again, he's always more open to being the low man, protecting the paint, putting his body on the line. Also, I do believe everyone is committed and on the same page with the idea of getting players such as Curry and Buddy Hield out of any type of action, constantly blitzing, showing, and then recovering. So make sure that no team is really taking advantage of some of their weak points. Again, these are all defensive principles that we saw from this team back in 2022 that are showing their head once more. And the reason for this is a big reason why I do believe that the Warriors, like I said in my NBA season preview, have a bit higher of a ceiling of those 46, 47 win teams in the Western Conference because of how they can really hold their hat on the defensive side of the floor. But hey, early on, not gonna lie, the Warriors look like they are a very clear 50 to 55 win team. Who knows where they're going to finish by the end of the season, but I can definitely say that the Golden State Warriors are back, and it's great to see really good basketball being played out in the Bay. Well, they're not in the Bay anymore, but you know what I'm saying. Y'all know what I'm saying. But yo, with that being said, please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, notification bell to be updated on even more NBA content throughout this week. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.